And welcome back. So in the previous video you saw that we got the rebuild done. We were able to successfully start, run, idle the motor, but we ran into a compression issue, or not, I shouldn't say compression issue, but a misfire issue on cylinders 1 and 7. So what we're doing this morning is, and you can see that we're got one spark plug out of the number 7 cylinder. We've got our compression gauge hooked up at this point. And it's going to be hard for me to kind of get you in there because I've got you charging at the same time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over. We're going to look at the compression on the number 7. Then we'll move to 1. And then we're going to check the compression on the number 4 cylinder, because we know that our number 4 cylinder is a valid cylinder. And that'll be kind of be our comparison. So I'm going to go in here and turn the key go ahead and turn the key, let it turn over a few times. Now we have we have the fuel pump fuse removed, and we have all the coil packs disconnected, so it's not going to try to start on us. So it's going to sound a little funny because we still have a spark plug missing out of cylinder 1 and cylinder 4, so it's going to sound a little lopsided when it's turning, like it doesn't have like it has a cylinder that's not contributing, and that would be the case because 1 and 4 is going to have no compression on it. So I'm going to hit this key, and then I'll come back here shortly. I'm going to sit you down, be right back. Okay, let's see what we got. You can see, I'll bring you in a little bit closer to see that, but you can see that we've got a flashing number on our compression gauge. You can see it's flashing at 200. That's because this compression gauge maxes out at 200. So we got about 200 psi in that cylinder. So we've got good compression. But if you remember from the previous video, when we idle up, we start to see the misfire start in that cylinder. So to me, it looks like the compression in that cylinder is fine, but we could still very well have potentially that an issue with that intake valve, since that was the cylinder in which that valve was bent, even though we checked it upon reassembly and it was actuating fine. But we need to keep that in mind. So number 7, we've got good compression. I'm going to pause you and get you set up on the number 1 cylinder, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So you can see we got our compression tester on our number 1 cylinder, and we're reset. So what I'm gonna do at this point is do the same thing. I'm gonna go over there and key cycle it, let it run a couple times, and I'll come back and I'll show you the result. It's just hard for me to get the camera situated where you can see the the gauge in real time. So really don't have a good mechanism to hold this. Yeah, that's gonna fall with the shaking of the engine. So don't worry, I'll show it to you. Okay, so let's look and see what we got for our compression. And you can see that number is no bueno. Not good. That is only 93. That should be at a minimum of 120. So we have got a low compression issue in our number 1 cylinder. So our number 7 cylinder was compression testing fine, but misfiring on high RPMs. Kind of feels like either A, bad piston rings, or B, we've got an issue with the sticking valve in that cylinder still. And cylinder 1 here is now showing low compression, whereas before the rebuild it was fine. So do we have a potential issue where something got damaged on the piston ring on this one? Potentially, but more than likely probably an issue with one of the valves not seating. Now that's something in both cases that once we can get a hold of a leak down tester, should be able to tell us, because we can pressurize the cylinder and watch how much blow by we're getting as we turn the engine over by hand, and be able to figure out, well, is it leaking from an intake valve or an exhaust valve, or is it just blowing past the piston rings? But that is the reason why it was okay with high RPMs, but then when it came down to idle, it started to show a misfire, because 93 psi isn't going to cut it. So what we're going to do, again, just to be fair, we're going to set back up and we're going to measure the compression on the number 4 cylinder, since we know that number 4 is good, and we're going to take a look at its pressure reading. Bring you back in a bit. Bye. Okay, welcome back. Got you set up on the number 2 cylinder, because we know that number 2 cylinder is a no and good. Hopefully you do not fall off your perch. It looks like I got you zoomed in on the gauge, so hopefully you'll be able to see it this time. I am going to turn it back on, let it zero itself back out. I'm going to hit the key a couple times and I'll be right back with you. You can see we've got a flashing 200 on there, which means we've maxed out our pressure gauge. So this is a knowingly good cylinder. We're getting over 200 psi of compression, which is the same amount of compression we're getting on the number 7 cylinder. And that also confirms that with our number 1 cylinder, we're definitely way low, which is not good. So that would mean that, like we were saying earlier, definitely number 7's got some kind of a sealing, or I'm sorry, number 1 has some kind of a sealing issue. Chances are we got a valve that is not either seating correctly or not closing correctly on that cylinder. Number 7's case, since it runs fine at idle and acts up at higher RPMs, it could be a sticking valve, in the sense that it's closing well enough to seal and generate compression, but it could just very well be that same intake valve not opening enough at higher RPMs to be able to get enough air and fuel in to combust properly. So that's my theory. I think we're going to run into where we still have an intake issue in number 7, and on the number 1 cylinder we're going to have to tear into it and see. But the next step is going to be, is an easy thing to do, is to pull the valve covers and make sure that the valves are actuating. And then potentially another item but we'll have to get a hold of a tester, is to do a leak down test on the number 1 and number 7 cylinders, to see if it will help diagnose whether we're having a leak issue either past the piston rings, because number 7 could still be a piston ring issue when you're bringing the throttle up. Although with it having 200 psi on a compression test, I don't know, it kind of seems like the rings might be okay. Number 1 could very well be piston rings and not a valve issue, but seeing as it didn't have a problem before the rebuild and now it does, it kind of to me points to, well, what did we touch while we were in there? Well, we reseated we lapped in new valves while we were in there. We also changed the valve springs and of course lifters. All that would definitely play an effect as to how well those valves open and close. So could it potentially be a set of bad lifters? I mean, it's possible. Like we said before, and other technicians have said, just because parts are new doesn't mean they're good. But in any case, we'll have to pull the valve cover off so we can get a visual inspection of what's going on, and then get a leak down test on 1 and 7 to determine what our next direction is going to be. Well, I'm out of time for today, unfortunately. I got other things that I need to do. So what I'm going to do is just at least get these spark plugs put back in these cylinders to keep this engine sealed up from the elements. And then we will come back and tackle this. And I'll come back and tackle this once I can get a hold of a leak down test to kind of help guide what our direction is going to be. In any case, like I said, worst case scenarios, we end up having to pull the driver's side cylinder head again. And if we do that, then we'll have a decision to make. Do we continue to invest going down the rabbit hole and seeing if it's a cylinder head issue that can be fixed and replaced on this motor? Or do we just go ahead and start prepping the donor motor to be pulled, built up, and then dropped into this truck? So I'll have to do some thinking on that. Anyway, with that being said, if you haven't subscribed and you found this information useful, please continue to do so, because as you've seen here, we got a lot more content coming your direction, as well as, and you'll see me release this here in a bit, but I'm going to do an introductory video on our second project, kind of the Red Ram 1500 2012 vintage that you kind of seen in a couple of shots, the one I'm referring to as the donor. But with that being said, I will let you go. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please consider to do so. We're really knocking right on that door of 1,000 subscribers. Once we can hit that milestone, it'll really help the channel out. With that being said, I'll let you go and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.